Copy this. Big Thinking Local Climate Action. Hi, I'm Rick Casale, co-founder of climate action charity Carbon Copy.
Hello, Rick. I'm Amanda Carpenter and I'm the host of Planet Pod. And today I'm co-hosting this podcast with you, which is actually the first in a series, isn't it, Rick?
It is. And it's really good to see you again because last time we met, it was a little crazy. I just finished walking 500 miles from London to Glasgow for COP26. And quite literally, having finished, you were there at the finish point, and it was like, okay, I'm doing a podcast about the Global Climate Summit. Why don't you join me?
Yeah,
I still have my walking boots on, I remember.
He did. He literally staggered in, breathless to the studio, and was fantastic. And it was a great start, I think, to what was a phenomenal couple of weeks in Glasgow. And you had just done the most amazing kind of, marathon walk. I must say, staying in Glasgow for 2 weeks felt like a bit of a marathon as well. But it was fabulous to have that, for me, to have that kickoff in that podcast series with somebody who'd come up through the country and met so many people who are putting into action some of the ambitions that we have around climate change and preventing the climate crisis. And the sorts of people you had met on your journey are utterly awe-inspiring. And I think that's kind of why we're here today, isn't it, really, to talk about those projects and the work that Carbon Copy does and showcase some of those amazing folk that you've been talking to.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And in fact, in terms of our guests today, literally they were on the route. So I met up with Jenny, who we'll introduce you to in a second, and she spoke all about what they are doing, which is so phenomenal. That's why I said, we've got to actually share this story a little bit more widely. We also actually went out and visited the site, and it was super windy. I remember that. It was really, the weather had turned, but I was blown away, figuratively, not literally, by the ambition of this project and how people have come together. And so I thought, we need to do something about this and share their story more widely.
And I'm not an expert about this, but I gather that what has been happening at Langholm Estate and the project that came out of that is an example of something called a local climate commons. Is that right? I don't know much about climate commons. Can you share with listeners what they are, Rick?
Yeah. So there's a really interesting report that came out last year by the think tank, the IPPR, the Institute for Public Policy Research. And that report is called The Climate Commons. And essentially, it's about the different kinds of things that local communities are doing across the UK, where they're coming together, creating and owning different kinds of assets. And so that could be, like a community-owned solar project, a local food co-op, a community land trust. And what's so compelling about this is that the aims, when the community owns it, tend to be much broader than just carbon emissions. There's a lot more around how can we give back to the community? How can we improve the resilience of the local area? In some cases, how can we address poverty or fuel poverty? How do we benefit from having more control? And I think it's just a super exciting space to be in. I think it's a really important part of the bigger goal of getting to net zero when we focus more than just on emissions. And for me, this initiative just brings it to life. Read the report by all means, but listen to what people are actually living and breathing it, are doing it, and then you kind of realize the wow factor around this kind of approach.
So we probably should listen to the people who are living and breathing it. And I think that's a good moment to introduce our guests. So thanks, Rick, for giving us that context. And it's fantastic to be joined in the studio. We haven't had to go anywhere this time, so no walking was involved. We have Jenny Barlow, who's an estate manager for the Tarras Valley Nature Reserve, which was established following the historic community land buyout in Langholm. Jenny has a background in environmental projects, land management, community development and sustainability. Jenny, huge welcome to Copy This, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having us. It's great to be here. And like Rick said, the last time I saw Rick, we were in an absolute blizzard. So it's quite nice to be inside.
Yeah,
it's quite nice to be inside now from the comfort of the office on Zoom. I'm not going to lie. So it's lovely to be here.
Warm and dry in our virtual studio.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, you're hugely welcome. And I'm delighted to welcome our second guest, Mairi Telford Jammeh, who's on the Tarras Valley Nature Reserve Executive Group. But Mairi grew up in Langholm, and after moving away and coming back in the 2000s, was part of that community buyout in 2020. So welcome, Mairi, and lovely to have you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to chatting to you and hearing what you think or thought of Tarras Valley too, Rick, and chatting to Jenny as well, of course.
Well, Jenny, maybe you could tell us a little bit about Tarras Valley and the initiative and how it all started, and paint a picture perhaps for our listeners who might not have been lucky enough to go there, Gales or no Gales.
Well, I can maybe set the context for just how we got here, and then I'll talk maybe a little bit about Tarras Valley itself. So Langholm Initiative. So I started working for the Langholm Initiative just back in July. And have just moved to Langholm. So very, very sort of quite a new Langholm resident. But the Langholm Initiative was set up as a community development trust 25 years ago. So it's one of South of Scotland's oldest community development trusts, or one of the oldest. And it was set up to deal with or to help regenerate the community of Langholm after a lot of economic heartache following the sort of decline of the traditional textile industries in Langholm, which it was, renowned for. World famous textiles were sort of coming out of Langholm, and then it gradually declined. And obviously there was, there's quite a big fallout from that. So that's where the Langholm Initiative has come from. And historically, they've done a lot of environmental projects, lots of social projects, real pillar in the community here. And to be honest, land ownership was not something that had been on the cards really. Mairi will be able to expand on this one later on, but yeah, it hadn't been something that had been considered before. And I mean, we can talk a bit more about the community buyout in a bit more detail, but the headline was that the land came up for sale. Absolute shock in the community. It has a really deep cultural value with the town of Langholm. There's a lot of cultural heritage tied to the land, and it was a real shock when it was announced that it was going to come up for sale. And actually, Mairi, you were working at the paper at the time, weren't you, when it came up for sale? So I don't know if you wanted to add anything there before I talk about the...
Yeah, we set up an organisation to take on the local newspaper back in 2017 because the Cumbrian newspaper group were going to get rid of it. So we set up a community-owned company to take that on. And actually, there's so many community organisations in Langholm that manage and deliver services. So we started that. But anyway, I think it was 2019, wasn't it, initially, that the Barlow, out of the blue, made a decision and announced that decision to sell the Tarras Valley, the Langholm Moor, as they had called it. I mean, I don't think anybody local ever called it Langholm Moor, but somehow it had been branded as Langholm Moor for a project, the Langholm project, which was looking at whether or not you could keep raptors on the moor by feeding them and still restore a grouse moor. And after many years of this multi-agency project, the decision was that actually it just wasn't viable to restore the grouse moor. So I'm not sure, there are probably a number of reasons or factors that came into Barlow's decision, but their decision and their announcement of that came completely out of the blue. And in fact, the paper had gone to bed that day. We had sent it off when this announcement came in. So we quickly had to put a sort of news flash together, and I think I stayed in the office till 8 o'clock. We had a pretty rubbish printer, to be honest. We had to print all of these copies of this newsflash so people could pick it up in the paper shop the next day. So it was completely out of the blue for everybody concerned that they would sell this land. I mean, it's quite a recent thing for them to sell any land.
Can I ask you, for those of us who don't know, a couple of things? I mean, A, whereabouts in Scotland is it? And B, who were the landowners? Was this a private landowner?
Barlow Estates were the landowner here, and, they owned virtually everything around Langholm. They're one of the biggest landowners in Britain, really. So big landowner. Most of the farms around here are tenanted. They're tenant farmers of Barlow. And I think they had dominated things, land use for a long time. The land that we bought was never sold before. So Buccleuch, the Duke of Buccleuch would have been, his ancestors would have been given it by the king, probably, I don't know whether it was the 17th century. And we know from, studies that have been done that these landowners in Scotland registered the land as their own. So it had never been sold before ever. And we're really close to the border between Scotland and England. We're only, Langham's 10 miles north of the border, so 22 miles north of Carlisle. So we border with Cumbria on the south side, and we're, the south end of the estate is literally maybe 5 miles, I think, Jenny, probably from the Scottish-English border. So that's where we are.
Yeah. And was this described as the impossible dream because of the scale of the land purchase? I mean, we're not talking about a small plot of land.
I think there's been a lot of community land buyouts, probably you're aware, in the north of Scotland, in the west, the Western Isles and the north of Scotland. But there hadn't been any land buyouts of this size in the south of Scotland at all. So this was a kind of pioneering thing, really, for the south of Scotland. There's also the amount of, the value that was put on the land that we had to raise. And of course, then we ran into COVID. So it certainly seemed a very impossible dream. I don't even think I believed that it could happen, to be honest with you.
I was just going to say, how much was the land? And if they hadn't sold it to you, who would they have sold it to? I mean, would it have gone for commercial development?
So the land was put up at £6.8 million for, so the Tarras Valley estate in Langholm Moor was put up as a big land parcel. So it was a huge amount of money, a huge undertaking for the community to start to look at buying this land. So it was over 10, the whole moorland went up for sale, but the parcel the community were interested in was a 10,500 acre parcel of land. So it covered the whole Tarras Water, so the headlands of the Tarras Water, top of the river catchment, goes right down through open moorland, quite dramatic upland landscape, right down into ancient woodlands, and it wraps around the town of Langholm. So it's a very iconic landscape for Langholm. A deep link with people who live here in the land. So I think the impossible dream as well was the fact, not just the cost of it and the fact that the community hadn't even, that they hadn't really embarked on the idea of land ownership. But it was also about, I think, the thing that drove it, and maybe, Mairi was, I'm kind of speaking from somebody who's just come to it quite new, but I think it was the risk of what might be taken away, and what might happen if somebody who bought it wasn't sympathetic to the links that the community have got with the land. So there's a lot of commercial forestry happening up here, sort of huge monocultures of Sitka spruce, wind farms, that kind of thing. So obviously we need renewable energy, but it's just the way that it's done and the designs and that kind of thing and the siting of them. So there was a lot of worry about what would happen to that land, and I think that was the driver. But
there was also a lot of passion for the wildlife.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes, exactly.
There's a substantial part of the land is designated as a triple SI. That's a site of special scientific interest, because of a special protection area, because of the hen harriers that nest there annually. It's probably one of the few places in Britain that you can sit in your car on a road and watch hen harriers doing a food pass during the breeding season, or watch short-eared owls or merlins. We have all of these birds of prey nesting on the land, and for quite a number of people here who are very keen ornithologists, there's a real passion for that land. They grew up watching. There was, a man in the town who was a sort of mentor in terms of ornithology to 2 or 3 people here who work as the sort of volunteer as part of the raptor group during the breeding season. They're up there every day making sure that these nests are not predated by humans. So there's a lot of passion for the wildlife and these big open spaces. But some of the land is also, I mean, it's kind of been traditionally used as picnic places and river swimming. And, you know, I hate to call it wild swimming because we've always swum in the rivers here. So, you know, it's a kind of favourite spot. It's a lovely spot.
How did you get people on board initially? Because I would think for some people, the scale of the ambition, the amount of money that you wanted to raise is so far-fetched, seemingly, that people will just disconnect and go, that's impossible, literally. So how did you manage to rally people around such an ambitious goal?
I think, well, initially, although it wasn't a community land buyout using the community land legislation that the Scottish Government have in place, and the reason for that was because a community organisation has to put a marker down that they want to buy something before it even comes on the market. But Barlow asked that we try to demonstrate that there was enough community interest in purchase, in, you know, buying the land, and a petition was put in place really quickly. And I think it was signed by over 800 people, which is quite a substantial proportion of the population, because Langholm is a population of about 2,300, 400 people. And then in the wider area, we're maybe talking about, you know, 3,000 to 4,000 people in total. So it was quite a substantial number of the population that signed the petition. So that was the first step, really. I think keeping it in the press, well, of course, having a community-owned newspaper may have helped a little bit, but we also had a very, very good press officer volunteered to support the work that we did. Jenny,
yeah,
do you want to say a little bit about him?
Oh, Richard's brilliant. So yeah, Richard helped us a lot with the sort of comms and, you know, the forward planning of a campaign and that kind of thing. It was all, you know, it's been very new to everybody, I think, and embarking on something so big and so high value. But I think looking back on it, I think it was very much a sort of a meeting of minds and the right people being in the right place at the right time. Definitely. And the story. And I think that's the thing that almost caught fire. It really, you know, just started from that little spark of people coming together saying, well, actually, let's do this. Let's just give this a go. What's the worst that can happen? And I think the idea that, you know, in the middle of lockdown and when we're bombarded with stories about climate emergency, natural world collapsing, you know, all these negative stories, actually something like this just sparked the imaginations and the passion in so many people. And I think it went so far beyond Langholm and it went into national, international press because of that story, that it was hope at a very dark time. You know, we were just hitting in the middle of the worst, you know, huge pandemic loss, you know, very, very dark time. And this was something that you can tangibly make a difference with. And I think it was that kind of thing of actually a lot of the time when you read the news, you don't feel like you've got any sort of control or power over anything, and it's hard to influence something that's so big as climate change or extinction. And actually this was something where people could tangibly make a difference and actually affect something, even if they're in Australia. And I think that story of hope was something that just catalysed, and it really did just go from such a little spark in Langholm, and it went like wildfire. And
the landowner Barlow were also willing to give us the time to do that and to try to raise the money. But you know, we did have, you know, a lot of coverage. We had The Guardian here, we had Financial Times, we had, you know, TV coverage. We had a lot of coverage. That helped a lot. It really helped a lot to get that message far and wide.
And is that what helped you raise the money? Because obviously with the population, the size you've been describing, you know, somewhere near between 4,000 and 6,000 people, there's no way you're going to raise, however generous people are, £6+ million. So was it because you had that big publicity campaign that you had donors from all over the world, or did you get any of the money from other sources? We have to maybe say that Kevin Cumming, who was the project manager, he was the project manager for the Wild Estill project, which was a kind of ecotourism development project. And he probably, I don't know who Kevin spoke to, but the networks widened and widened, and he was advised on people
what he called high net worth individuals that he could talk to that might be interested in putting money forward. He, he spoke to so many NGOs, like the John Muir Trust, who eventually poached him, actually, and organisations like the Woodland Trust, and so we got £1 million grant from the Scottish Land Fund. Of course, we have that fund in Scotland for community land buyouts, and the maximum grant is £1 million. They can give exceptionally more than that, but that was all they could offer us at that point. So we were lucky to get that £1 million from them.
We also had, alongside all the private and public grants we were applying for, so there was a wide range of different funders that came forward from sort of private family trusts, charitable organisations, and obviously the public funds like South of Scotland Enterprise and Scottish Land Fund. We also had a public crowdfunder as well. So that had a target on that of 200, I think it raised 200,000 in the end, with about 4,000 people donated on that. That was really good, because although there was all of these big grant giving organisations that were helping to boost that number and get into the millions, that was a real way of seeing the public support and how far that support was coming from. And actually, it wasn't whether you give 50,000 or £5, you were helping to bring, make something like this happen. And that was a really nice way of people being able to, donate what they could and help it happen.
We even had a little primary school in Glasgow who they did a sponsored, I'm not sure whether it was, a walk or a jump?
Yeah, I think it was a walk,
And they raised, I think it was was it either £200 or £400? They're a very sort of eco-friendly school, a tiny primary school in Glasgow, amazing. And they gave us that money, and that was so touching, really, that they were following our story, so they still have to come and visit us at some point.
Yeah, they do.
You're listening to Copy This, a podcast about working together on big thinking local climate action.
But
I think that really brings to life how this kind of a story just captures people's imagination, like you were saying. And I'm wondering how, there must have been a number of partnerships and organizations that got behind you, some that you were hoping for, some that were unexpected. Do you want to talk a little bit about, some of the people that actually rallied around this project?
I think for something this ambitious, the partnerships, no matter what form they take, are absolutely crucial to doing anything like this, because there's, the networks that Mairi mentioned, those networks, and even if it, knowledge, resources, all those things, and just bringing together people that can help make things happen, and bringing together those like minds is something that we couldn't have done, those partnerships, it couldn't have been done without them. For example, we've got a really good partnership now because of the buyout with the Woodland Trust. So they're helping support all our woodland creation activity, that we've got access to all of their expertise around ancient woodlands, forestry, so that again is brilliant. And then we've also got, through lots of different funders who supported the buyout. So for example, John Muir Trust, Esme Fairbairn, South of Scotland Enterprise. Through that funding, we've also got access and there's a lot of expertise from staff that are helping us pretty much every day with just the daily operations and helping us to sort of find our feet as community landowners. So I think that diversity of Community Land Scotland are another one. It isn't just environmental, but it actually brings in that economic and the social side of things as well. So I think the partnerships is recognizing that you can't have all the skills in one team, and also bringing in that fresh perspective. And I think that really helps, because if the more different perspectives are brought in, you actually get such a diversity of different ideas. And I think that's and in partnership with that, obviously the community are at the heart of what we're doing. So one of the things that we've been, since the team came into place in July, we've had a really extensive program of community engagement with just the new nature reserve team that's in place. And that's been really helpful, because a lot of us are new to Langholm. We've moved here for the jobs, and actually starting to just get that experience with the community and seeing how they see things, how they perceive things, what their priorities are, what is going to make a difference for them. And I think that sort of collaborative work and will be a thread throughout everything we do. But that again brings that fresh perspective of something, it brings a different perspective to what we're doing. So I think that's,
we've been really fortunate in getting the funding that we did to employ the staff, because we now have 4 members of staff and a finance person in place. And we managed to get funding for a sort of education person who also recruits and supports the volunteers from a Dumfries and Galloway trust that provides money for young people's projects, the Hollywood Trust, as well as from a local wind farm community benefit fund. And we've managed, in the South of Scotland Enterprise, which was a new organisation, really, just as we were starting, they provided money for a development officer who is looking at the commercial aspects of the project or the work, so that the going forward we can continue to sustain the work. And then an anonymous donor, I don't think I can say who it was, but provided money for a 3-year digital project so that we could record the changes that would take place on the land over a 3-year period, using video, using sat tagged images, all of that kind of stuff. So Stuart is fairly new in post, but I think we've got a fantastic team now, and all very enthusiastic and all bringing different skills and experience and background to the team.
Yeah, it sounds the most amazing collaborative community regenerative project. But you've got this beautiful bit of land, and Jenny, you described it so eloquently, kind of rolling down and wrapping around the community. What kinds of things are happening in that space? I mean, obviously you're not going for heavy monoculture planting. Are you doing some rewilding? Are you're working with Woodland Trust? Are you planting trees? What kind of habitats are you creating that are there for both the natural world and also the community?
So I suppose in terms of the natural sort of ecosystem side of things, we've already got already quite a rich habitat, although it has had obviously years of sort of modification, decades, probably hundreds of years actually, of sort of alteration by humans. So I suppose there is an element of, there's quite a lot of restoration still to be done. So there's, for example, on the moorland, we've got lots of drains and ditches where it's been historically drained, all the blanket bog, which we know now, the peatlands are so good for sort of capturing carbon from the atmosphere, but not when they're all drained and sort of drying out. So, there's lots of projects like that. And woodland, we've got lots of river habitat as well. So we've got a very rich sort of mosaic of habitats already. And I think what we're trying to work out is sort of at the moment, we want to follow probably quite a low intervention approach, but obviously recognizing that it's going to need that human intervention to get us to a restored habitat. And that will take a very long time. And it's a sort of, I think the perspective on it needs to be a sort of long-term vision for the recovery of the landscape. But we're starting to look at where trees need to be planted, or where can we naturally encourage trees to grow. We've already got on the moorland, because of the historic project that Mairi mentioned earlier, we've got a lot of trees already regenerating because the grazing pressure has been reduced. So it is literally phenomenal to go on there and just see nature already starting to re-establish itself. And it is just, there's a point on the reserve where so we've also got 6 properties on the reserve as well, and there's a cottage right in the centre of the reserve called Cronksbank, and you can stand there and look right up the valley, which is all now in community ownership, and you can just see all these little saplings just gradually sort of working their way back up the hills from the ancient woodland in the bottom of the valley, and it's just very special to see it. So I think what we want to do is encourage natural processes wherever we can, but we also need to recognise that we will have to intervene and catalyse them and catalyse that restoration. And obviously, a core of what we're doing is, and Mairi touched on it earlier about how sort of precious the wildlife is locally, and I think that's something that under community ownership, and we've talked a little bit earlier about sort of economic decline, actually having such a huge, amazing natural asset in community ownership means that we can start to look at projects like ecotourism, glamping, hiking trails, and encouraging more people to come and visit here. So it isn't just about, you know, the restoration of the natural world, but it's also all the benefits that brings to people and all the benefits that brings to the community, and also that other people can come here and experience the beauty of the place, and you know, so, and everybody definitely should come and visit because it is so beautiful.
I definitely second that. It was breathtaking. I think there will be, you know, several people listening in their local communities thinking, you know, what can I take away from this? You know, we are not going to be necessarily as ambitious as you and want to buy thousands of acres, but nonetheless, we want to do something similar. Do you have any thoughts or learnings that you could pass on?
I think get together with like-minded individuals, and they might not be the usual suspects. Some people just don't want to get involved. I kind of got the feeling that some people didn't really want to stick their neck out, actually, and, you know, but I think also network with those organisations that we've touched on already that I think are, you know, are willing to lend support or offer funding or give you information and advice or whatever. I think that's really important, and they might not be just on your doorstep, but, you know, I do think we need to, even in the south of Scotland, I was talking to the manager of the Southern Uplands Partnership recently and just saying to him, look, we need a network of people who are doing these kinds of projects on the south of Scotland. He's a former colleague of mine, so I was kind of saying, get on with it. We need this, you know, because I really think that networks are so important for learning, for moral support. It's very hard if you're working, you know, these staff have come to Langholm, they're new to Langholm, they don't really know all the networks that exist across the south of Scotland, although Stuart might, because he did work here before, but I think it's that networking, reaching out, talking to people, learning along the way. I think that's the main.
And I think this story, probably, you know, that what we've done here illustrates, and on there's so many other examples that were highlighted on the COP26 walk, that actually when you have a meeting of minds and a group of people come together against towards a shared goal, it is quite amazing what can be achieved. And actually at the start you might not think that it's going to happen, but when you get enough people behind something, then you can make amazing things happen. And I think that's the thing that to focus on, rather than looking at it and thinking, oh well, what's the point? There is no point of even looking at that. And I think when we're looking at climate change and all the social issues and environmental issues we're facing at the moment, that's the kind of attitude we have to have, I think, just to being really hopeful and positive and bringing people together. And actually that catalyzes something that you would never have been able to plan for. I think probably it would be worth saying that I suppose in Scotland there has been a lot of reform in terms of land ownership, which has put those tools in place for communities to be able to purchase land that maybe might not be in place in other areas, have made funds available and that kind of thing. But I've worked in other places in England where there's been community asset transfers and some amazing examples of community ownership, not just land but assets. So I think it is, like Mairi said, it's I suppose it's not being scared to go and approach sort of different organisations and put ideas forward for those kind of things, and networks to bring people together. And goes without saying, sharing the message on social medias, that goes without saying.
Being brave, I think.
Being brave.
What I'm hearing from both of you, it is incredible sort of, willingness to take risks, to be brave, to push boundaries. And Mairi, the place you grew up where you kind of, picnicked by the river and swam, and you've come back to, it just that passion for your landscape, for the place that you live, and not being deterred, even if it seems like an incredibly huge obstacle. I mean, you referred to it as the kind of impossible dream, but you've made it happen in a way that just sounds absolutely incredible. I'm packing my bag now as we speak. My boots are on. I'm ready to go. I want to hang out and look at those raptors.
Yeah, I mean, I do it for my father. I do it for Tom, who was the inspiration for so many of these ornithologists that, I spent the spring of 2020 and under lockdown, sitting up on the hill at a social distance, of course, watching these birds. It was the most fantastic birding year, 2020. But what the weather was like. It was dry. It was amazing. So I do it for all of these people. I think it's just great, and for the next generations to come. I think it's something, a legacy, hopefully, for this community and others, and people like yourselves to come and visit.
And I suppose we're not quite finished, because we still haven't actually completed our entire land purchase. So I suppose we couldn't be here without dropping that one in.
No.
So you're rattling that tin, are you?
Yeah.
But Rick, I mean, I say this kind of epitomizes what you're trying to do at Carbon Copy, doesn't it? This is the idea of communities who can do things for themselves together in those networks, and then take that learning and share it elsewhere. So replicate the things, and no two projects would ever be the same, would they? But from your perspective as an organization, an extraordinary example of how you could really make this work and really get it right.
I think so. And also what comes across really, really strongly is that local can have a really big impact. Sometimes people think that local means small, but very often it's just the opposite. And starting local gets all these people together, gets these organizations behind it. And, they were talking about a spark that really ignites something that's huge. And this, you feel the passion. You've seen how far they've come. Many people would think that buying 5,000 acres is already gargantuan, but no, they want to do it all over again. I mean, one thing leads to another. We could talk for ages, but unfortunately we've come to time. I'd like to thank Jenny and Mairi. I mean, fantastic. And good luck, both of you, on the next chapter of your story.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
It's just been a delight. It really, really has. And I have to say that, everybody listening to this will be completely inspired. And thank goodness you're doing ecotourism, because you're going to be overrun. Thinking, our producer's already got his binoculars out. He can't wait. But what a fabulous, inspirational story. And just that idea that it's something that's gone across generations, reaching back, as you said, Mairi, into the past and reaching forward into the generations yet to come. Truly inspirational, a really fabulous project. And what a great example to start our podcast series with, Rick.
Yeah, and next time, for our next episode, we are off to Hull, one of the places in the UK that's at risk, or most at risk, from extreme flood events, to hear the amazing story of how that city and its people have come together in response. So thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and huge thank you to our guests, and goodbye.
Bye.
For more information about today's episode, check out carboncopy.eco/copythis. Join in the conversation by following us on Twitter and using the hashtag #CopyThisPod. Until next time.